just a second. I am going to be bringing out our guests today. We will be led by Kevin Sullivan, who is Principal Consultant with SDM Software, and Danny Ferry, Senior Solutions Architect, also with SDM Software. Without further ado, let me now introduce Kevin and Danny. Welcome, guys.
Thanks, David. Good to be here.
Nice to meet you, Dave.
Nice to meet you, Danny. Kevin, great to have you back. So we got a lot to talk about. Obviously, group policy and Intune affect a huge portion of our audience. So let's get right into it. What do you guys want to focus on today?
Oh my gosh, we have so much to talk about. One of the things, just to lead into it, many have read this CISA article that came out recently. Back in early March, around the 11th, I believe, there was a breach where a rogue admin wiped a ton of devices at the Stryker Corporation, a medical devices manufacturer. And the article was interesting because it pointed to some really important things that really are why we're here today. What we know about this Stryker breach, the article is a little vague if folks have read it, but we know is a hacker, it appears to be a nation state hacker, executed a mass device wipe, caused operational shutdowns, a ton of chaos, supply chain, distribution chain, everything got impacted. And they did it by compromising admin credentials. Now that ability to grab some privileged credentials and horizontally navigate across the organization and execute something like this is sort of horrifying. They used what they call a living off the land technique. They just utilized native permissions, native tools. They didn't do anything really, hacky. They just got in. They were able to compromise the credential and they got in and just used what they had available to do this very disruptive attack. What does it tell us? Now, I led the what does it tell us with secure your management platforms. It is arguable that hardening your identity should come first, but being an endpoint configuration-minded person, I chose to lead with that. But regardless, you need to be very aware, protective, diligent. You need to be reviewing your access rights, reviewing your management platforms, and make sure that you're not leaving opportunities for people to exploit. And lastly, we read all the time about ransomware. It's not just about ransomware. If someone gets in, they can do damage, and that is not good. So anyway, really interesting timing for that article. I have been in and out of Microsoft. I spent the most of the last 20 years of my life as a Microsoft employee working on the engineering team. I started there through the acquisition of Desktop Standard, which brought advanced group policy management to Microsoft. But then we quickly pivoted around 2008 and started focusing on this cloud platform that is Intune. And there are lots of things to be aware of. We've got to peel the onion back, look at conflicts and misconfigurations, and look at the impact of the fact that AGPM is going away very soon, possibly next week. And then what can you do to make sure that you're not only clean today, but you build processes that keep you sort of clean in the future, right? You want to make sure that you're constantly reviewing and looking at these things. So Danny, what do you think? What is next? If you're an AGPM user and this April 14th date, like I was always scared of April 15th because it was tax day and I probably wasn't done doing my taxes. But now I'm scared of April 14th. Why should I not be scared, or what should I be concerned with?
Yeah, so just because they've given a date, it doesn't mean that AGPM is going to stop working. So you could continue to still use it. It just means it's going to be unsupported. And again, in some cases, some larger organizations might have done some sort of an exception so that they can continue. I'm not sure if that's true for anybody in our audience, However, the issue is that it is going away. So now we need to understand how are we going to, coordinate, orchestrate, and manage our endpoint configuration lifecycle on premise and in the cloud. Because now, as you mentioned, we started, a lot have started moving to Intune. And then finally, the second point here, how are we going to facilitate a unified, timely reporting, compliance management, and audit? So how can we do that across both endpoints? Now that AGPM is going to go away, is it time to look at another product out there that can help fill the gaps of AGPM or even surpass those?
Yeah, just to throw a little history in there, it might be interesting to some. Back in, gosh, I think it was 2004, at a directory experts conference up in Vancouver. My leader at the time was a dev. He was a deep developer. He was a very, very brilliant developer. And he really thought, from a configuration management perspective, we needed to implement something similar to source save, what check in, check out, role based, all of those core scenarios. And we applied that to group policy because that was our sort of bread and butter at the time. But what we know over the years is that change management isn't just about group policy, right? It's about all things, but we're here to focus on configuration management, whether it's GP or Intune. But let's look at the bigger picture here. There's a bit of a list here, so take a second and read it. If anything pops up, we surely have some that are important to us.
Yeah, Kevin, I'm just going to interject here. So one of them that pops up got to do with scattered IT teams. Do you mean like physically scattered, or do you mean that like functionally just sort of misaligned? And also curious, as you go through the talk, is where it kind of weaves in with the Stryker breach.
Oh, actually, really great comment. Thank you. The answer to your question is yes, all of those things, and maybe more. Scattered IT could be everything from, I have silos in my organization, so different people manage different parts of the business. Maybe I have some IT dedicated to sales and some to manufacturing and some to marketing and some to operations, whatever. If they're too siloed and they're not communicating and they're not working lockstep with each other, that could be problematic. From a knowledge perspective, though, people have spent 30 years learning and developing insights into how group policy functions. They're good at troubleshooting it. It's been there for a long time. Now this cloud thing is coming up, and a lot of organizations have spun up new teams. So you might have an Intune team that's separate from the group policy team, and do they talk, right? And do they communicate? And is there knowledge share? And are they working with the same tooling and those kinds of things? Another area that is representative of scattered IT teams is many organizations have a team that manages endpoints and a different team that manages servers. Or many have teams that manage configuration and a different team that manages identity, right? That's a direct callback to that CISA article, right? The idea that my identity folks and my configuration folks are not lockstep could be part of the challenge, right? If my identity folks have, privileged accounts that are in really powerful groups, do they understand the implication of doing that? Anyway, Danny, any thoughts from you on scattered IT teams? I think that's a big challenge that we come across all the time.
Yeah, it is. And where it adds the complexity is the processes around it, right? So you might have a process that's on-prem for those who are dealing with server policies, those who are dealing with the corporate policies within Active Directory and on-prem domain. And then you have a different process for Intune, There's a really good point here. Hybrid IT infrastructure with inconsistent settings across its instances, and we hear some of our customers saying, that's a challenge that they're having. Is that, as Kevin mentioned, the two teams are not really talking. GPOs might have one setting, especially when it's hybrid, and then they're also applying Intune, and they might be conflicting. And so that's the bigger challenge. That's one of the pieces of the big picture, as the slide mentions.
Yeah. And the infrastructure piece, like the technology that drives a I'll use the word legacy. Not everyone loves it, but a legacy platform like Group Policy and the platform that drives this modern configuration platform for Intune are very, very different. And even
Yeah,
within the Microsoft stack, you have Microsoft security is encompassed by Entra ID, Intune, Defender, Sentinel, Purview. Like these different areas of capabilities that Microsoft is really pushing very hard. Some of them have very different infrastructures. Now they're doing incredible work to bring that together, but it's timing. The piece
yeah.
that always go ahead.
Kevin, I was just going to say that really leads well into the limited governance across, both environments. And we talked earlier about inherited conflicts, a GPO as an attack vector. What are some that you see that might resonate with you here?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's challenging here, and this really resonates with me, is the future is always a moving target. So, like I said, we got used to this technology that drives GPO. And for those who are really deep in group policy, you know what a registry.pol file is. You know what client-side extensions are. You know what, if you're really old like me, you know what ADM files are, or now ADMX and ADML. You know what the central store is. You understand those moving parts. And Advanced Group Policy Management gave us a mechanism to make it a little bit simpler to manage those things. But in Intune, you don't have ADM and ADMX, you have CSPs. What are Windows CSPs? What's the MDM stack in Windows, and why do I care? Oh my gosh, I can manage iOS and Android in Intune. What does that mean? How does Apple's operating system work with the environment versus, the Windows operating system? And those sort of architectural differences require us to learn more. We need to hold ourselves accountable to be knowledgeable about these pieces. But it really shines a light on the fact that these are different. I can't always use my old knowledge and transfer it directly. I need to sort of rework it.
Yeah.
One of the things I love, and this is a little maybe humble brag, maybe not, for those of you who know what I'm about to talk about. When I first got to Microsoft, the team that I was leading delivered the first PowerShell module for group policy to do basic heavy hitting things like create a GPO, delete it, those kinds of basic things. And PowerShell has created this journey for us in IT that has been consistent. So now in Intune, I can do a lot of PowerShell. In Group Policy, I can do a lot of PowerShell. Thankfully to SDM Software, there are deep capabilities to get into PowerShell to help with your automation frameworks. I wanted to spend a minute to talk about AI,
Oh,
not
right. Yeah.
because not because it's super impactful to us today, but it surely is something that we think about and talk about all the time. And we need to tease out some of the important aspects here. I'm in AI every day. I'm in Gemini, I'm in Copilot, I'm in ChatGPT. I'm using these tools, I'm using Claude, and the way I work has changed because of those types of consumer-focused AIs. On the IT side, we need to acknowledge this piece of AI that Microsoft is working on called Security Copilot. And you're going to see this in Intune. And you're going to see agents in Intune. And you're going to see all kinds of things evolve in the coming months and years. And your experience in endpoint management is going to evolve as well. In July, your E3 and E5 licensing that you have in place is going to suddenly include capabilities from what Microsoft has called the Intune suite. If you're not familiar with those things, you should go and become familiar. Some of those Intune suite capabilities call on AI. They call on agents. They utilize these technologies. So I don't think this is something that needs to change the way we work necessarily today on a big picture level, but we surely need to keep paying attention because it really can fundamentally change how we think about our interactions with the system. I mean, I argue with AIs all the time. I can't wait to the time where I walk into the office, I boot up my computer, and I say, hey, Maiko, what's on my docket today? What do I need to focus on? And what does my boss care about? I want that kind of interactive experience so that I get driven by the system instead of me trying to manipulate the system. Anyway, I bring that up only because I think it's really fascinating where we are today. I think we are in a situation that operationally speaking, we need to understand group policy and Intune. We need to understand these potential attacks that we saw from CISA and their recommendations on how we address those attacks. One of their big recommendations is change management. Let's focus on change management, which Microsoft has thankfully done for many years with AGPM, but now it's going away. So what is next, right? Next week, it is not supported solution for you. And in most organizations, running an unsupported solution is not okay and not supported. But, like Danny mentioned earlier, I think it's worth saying again, this product doesn't die, doesn't stop working. This is an on-prem solution that you have downloaded, but it's no longer going to get security updates or support or any other attention. Arguably, it hasn't really over the past many years. If you do release a new or if Microsoft releases a new version of the OS, and if they release an update, or if there's your server gets updated and the components that drive AGPM need to be updated, if they're not compatible, you suddenly lose your change management environment.
Yeah, and you could start having, issues. We actually have spoken with customers that have had issues with AGPM for a while, where it was flaky. It wasn't, near the last couple of years, it was causing some corruption with GPOs. So yeah, it is something that that organizations need to have some deep considerations on what they're going to do next. Yeah.
Yeah, and our perspective is this is not a time to just simply give people more native rights to group policy. I think that is a bad choice. It's a little self-serving of a statement because we do have a solution that manages change in your environment. But this is a time to really think about, these bullets. Windows, Intune, security, that's going to evolve. AGPM isn't. Now we stop and we think and we pause and we reflect. It's time to modernize. That doesn't just mean move to Intune. Modernize maybe take a critical look at your current group policy infrastructure and give it a critical analysis. What's needed, what's not needed, who's in there, who has access, why do they have access, do I redo my ACLs? All of these things are proactive. You look at your environment using good reporting tools, using good analytics, and make informed changes. So if you come to the point where you're moving to Intune, you're migrating good data. You're not migrating a bunch of junk. And we've all been through that, I imagine. So any thoughts on this moment, Danny? Like, what do you think people need to consider and think about as they near AGPM's retirement?
Yeah, no, exactly what you mentioned. It is time to, I mean, we talk a little bit later about managing policies, whether it's group policies or Intune policies, is a life cycle, right? It's a continuous thing, reviewing the policies and making sure that they're still consistent. There are organizations out there that they're just so busy. They don't have time to go through and review these things until an incident happens. right? Or until CIS releases a new baseline, or Microsoft releases a new security best practice baseline. And that's like maybe once a year or so forth, right? And so taking the time to actively review not only cleaning up of GPOs, but also reviewing the process, as you mentioned, who has access, who does not have access. AGPM could have been, because it's a legacy product, the permissions to the service account could be peppered throughout, domain admins, enterprise admins, instead of having a least privilege model. So not cleaning that up, could leave you open, right?
Yeah, and a callback to infra differences. You talk about domain admins and enterprise admins. In Entra, we're talking about global administrators. We're
Mm-hmm.
talking about Intune admins and different roles that have been defined in Entra and in Intune.
Yeah,
But again, misconfiguration, and I'm as guilty as this as anyone. If people looked at my lab, they would laugh because I create, you know, security vulnerabilities because it makes my life easier as I'm testing and demonstrating things.
right.
But that is not good, right? That's a bad practice that people need to get rid of. But zero trust is our goal. Let's implement least privilege. Let's assume our organizations are being breached. Let's make sure that we're protecting the perimeter. Let's do all of these things so that we are now working in a modern way with regards to configuration management. So I do have an interesting sort of question, and we're going to share some of our thoughts here. But if you do have an opportunity to go into the chat, answer this question for us. What are your most pressing challenges when you're managing group policy and Intune configuration profiles? We have some areas of challenges in configuration management and benefits that we tend to focus on. What pops for you in this area, Danny? Both challenges and benefits.
Yeah, so you can see them on the screen. Reliability, configuration changes for Windows servers and desktops that are expected to be delivered every time. So making sure that the configuration of a group policy when it comes to servers, or the configuration of an endpoint when it comes to workstations, are delivered consistently. And we talked earlier about, are there any conflicts between using an Intune policy and a GPO? Are we creating conflicts there? Security, that's a big one. Who has the ability to make changes? And again, we talked earlier about is it currently being locked down? And that's where a good change management solution does come into play. And auditing is the next one. So if we do have a change management solution, do we have auditing in place so that you're making sure that whether you're making changes within the product or outside of the product, you're using PowerShell or using GPMC natively, you're actually auditing those as well. You're catching those. So in case there is a rogue person that has kind of laterally moved across the organization, you can pick up the changes that they're making.
Yeah, great points. We actually, over the years, have realized that auditing that isn't that isn't reviewed or used is not helpful. If you're doing deep auditing, not only to figure out who's making changes when, why, and how, but just what's going on, what's the system doing?
Yeah,
In
being
group
aware.
policy, we've got a scenario where, and I'm sure many people can empathize with this, there are GPOs in your environment that someone created 15, 20 years ago, and you don't know what they are, what they're for, who did them. It's just there, and it's easier to ignore it than to sort of lean in. So along with auditing, we tend to think of attestation at the same time. So when you own a configuration environment or profile or some type of configuration object, you have to occasionally look at it, remind yourself what it is, and say, yeah, this is still good. And we all see this today in sort of consumer security products. If you're on WhatsApp, how often do you open up the app and it says, hey, is this still your recovery cell phone number? Or is this, attest to the quality of the insight, because it may get old over time. So this leads very nicely into a bit of a life cycle, right? So operations for IT is not a start and end project for most of us. This is a ongoing continuous delivery model, which means we have to continually be looking at our environment, optimizing for performance, for efficacy, optimizing for cleanup, making sure that you're getting rid of old stuff that's not necessary. And then as things are going day to day, manage your changes, implement solutions that can monitor what changes are occurring, so that either from a forensics perspective or from just an operational perspective, you can actually get in and see that and benefit from it. That gets into governance and compliance and external auditing as well. But internally, audit and certify, validate, make sure that what you're seeing is important. If it's not, go back to your cleanup. And then end of the day, you can ask the world, you can ask Gemini or Copilot or whatever a question, but until you go to the source and validate from the source, you can't ensure compliance. We had this issue with group policy, not an issue. We had this reality with group policy. We ran GP result, and GP result would look at group policy and tell you what policy was going to be delivered to Danny or Danny's computer. You had to run it differently to look at Danny's computer and see if it was actually what the server said it was going to be. Is my administrative intent reflected on the endpoint or the configuration target, right? So that is that validate piece. But again, we all know this. This isn't do this once and move on. This is just part of our week, right? These are things that we do to keep the lights on. And Danny, help us sort of map this to what we're doing at SDM Software, because I want to use that as a bit of a trigger to move deeper into what we do.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so we do have products that align with each of these steps. We have GPO migrate. First of all, let me start with reporting pack, trying to identify what's currently in your GPOs, so that you can clean up and optimize. Then migrator maps nicely to being able to migrate, not only consolidate GPOs when you're trying to do a cleanup, maybe consolidate them into a new GPO or an existing GPO, but also
mergers
eventually
and acquisitions.
Yes, mergers and acquisitions, but also for also to be able to migrate those to Intune. Like you might not need to. Microsoft has the option to be able to upload a group policy to Intune, and then it will just, you can pick, it does the mapping, and then it creates an Intune profile. But what if you don't want to pick everything? Or what if you want to merge the settings from a few different GPOs into an existing Intune profile where you can't do that natively? So these products here help with that. Manage change, we have Change Manager. This would be the replacement for AGPM. And it does so much more than AGPM. But as you were talking, I was thinking here, this applies to small to medium organizations as well as large organizations. Some people think, oh, I don't really need a change management solution because I'm small, right? But having that oversight, it could be your manager who's the approver, and then you're the editor, not a problem. Having that oversight so that people are aware of what's going on, being able to schedule a deployment of a change so that you can be in line, you can fall in line with your internal change management policies.
From a role perspective, we've seen organizations where the same person is an editor and an approver,
right.
And it just disciplines them, to follow the steps instead of just assuming that everything is good. I think committing to the first step is the hardest part.
That's a good point.
Yeah, it takes a long time to get people to say, no, no, we're going to do this, right? And carve out the time and do it. But if you're just, let's use what Danny's talking about. If you're doing your cleanup and optimization with some deep reporting, um, maybe a half hour, hour to learn the tool, and then you can dive in and start
Yeah.
getting some deep analytics and deep reports, and then spend the time on that. But going through the whole cycle, you know, these are relatively simple capabilities. I don't know that it's going to be a huge project. It's really just committing to a model or a rubric, and then finding the tools that support your model, right? So that you're doing good ITs.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. I mean, setting up any product, there's a learning curve around that. But when it comes to this process, yeah, exactly. If you've never done any cleanup, and that might be sound daunting, right? But if you have the tools, it's less daunting. But the largest issue, as Kevin was mentioning, is commitment. People think, well, if it's not broken, why touch it, right? But in this world of security and hacking and things being deprecated, settings being deprecated as new settings come into place, that review is very important.
Yeah, it's interesting because as you just said that, Danny, and thinking of this CISA report, thinking of this breach at Stryker, um, we're a configuration team. Like we focus on configuration objects and managing configuration, but it is not, you need to consider in this life cycle doing your analysis of your identity for, fabric as well. Where do these privileged user accounts, what are you using privileged identity management for? Are you using MFA? What are the checkpoints you put in? And even though that's outside of the bounds of what SDM brings to the table, it should be part of this process, right? You should be thinking about that as well. Um,
Yeah. But Kevin, we do have an example of a story on the next slide, if you wanted to kind of go there. And that kind of, I think, would answer some of the questions that the audience might have. So this is an example of a customer who had about 75,000 endpoints, 70,000 Active Directory users. So, not small in any way. They had about 30 internal IT members to train, and about 1,000 policies to migrate. And they followed that lifecycle step that we saw in the earlier slide: the assessment and planning, the installation, customization, and onboarding. You want to do things on a phased approach, and then finally, if you're getting off of AGPM, we have the opportunity to be able to migrate the history and the backups over to our product change manager. And then finally, there's the greater IT team training. So that in itself took about 3 months. It doesn't have to take that long. I mean, to install Change Manager and get things started going, it doesn't take more than 2 hours if everything goes well. So, yeah. So, and this is a very large environment. So that kind of gives you an indication of how big or how long it would take to uh,
yeah,
to
I would like to
automate.
call out one thing on this story. Hybrid is a good thing, in my opinion. Hybrid is not something that is very temporary for most organizations. As you start to embrace cloud technologies, you're still relying on this huge infrastructure investment that you've made over many years. And most organizations stay in that hybrid state for a very long time. It's rare to find cloud only. So this customer is hybrid, has been hybrid, so they're dealing with both at the same time. That's a good segue into a demo, Danny. You want to walk through some stuff for us?
Yeah, for sure. Let me just share my screen. All right, so this is an example. This is our one of our products, Change Manager for Group Policy and Intune. And as you can tell, it is a modern product. You do use a web UI, so it's nice and sleek. You have the option to sign in with Windows authentication. We can do SSO with Entra ID. When you first log in, the dashboard does present you with the GPOs, containers, and Intune profiles that are delegated to you. So this is delegated to me. I've logged in. This is what rights I have to see. And it does give you a good overview of the condition of your environment or the state of your GPOs. Under my objects, you get to see there are three types of objects that we do perform change management on. There's the GPOs. So you can select a GPO, you get to see the status, the action, and then you get to see the details of the GPO here. The other option is containers. Just as it is important to review the settings of a GPO to make sure you're not including anything, any mistakes in that, it's just as important to ensure that you review which GPO gets linked to an OU or to a domain or to a site. And that's the
One poorly linked GPO could be your career limiting configuration
right,
keys.
right, yeah. And then finally, the Intune profiles. You can manage your Intune profiles right from the same screen, And so as you can see, you have one single pane of glass that allows you to manage all three types of containers in your environment. When it comes to delegation, we have about 7 out of the box roles: product administrator, GPO creator, break glass, and then we an auditor, and then we have an additional 3 more roles: approver, editor, and deployer. We have this awesome fine-grained delegation here with restricted policies. So let's say, David, you have the password policies. You have a security engineer that's responsible for all the security decisions that are being done or changes that are being done in the environment. You can limit this section of the policy only for that security engineer. So everybody else can go ahead and make changes as they need to other parts of the GPO. But when it comes to this portion of the GPO, that's been reserved for that one security engineer or a group of security engineers or whoever you define in the allow user or group. We also have notification and alerting. So every action that happens when you check something out, like when you check something out, edit it, and then check it in, you get that notification that goes to the approver via email. And that approver is going to get a before and after snapshot of the GPO. So they're going to get a difference report. They're going to say, what's in production is these settings, but now it's been changed to this. Do you want to approve it or do you want to reject it? So they can do that. And then if you do have a separate deployer role, so a different person who does do the deployment, then once they approve it, it will go to the deployer role, the person who is going to be deployed. And they get that same difference report, right? So throughout the actions in Change Manager, you're being kept informed as to the changes that are being done. On top of that, we have the ability to also send additional alerting to a Teams channel. Now, this is my lab, so it's not very exciting, but you get to see an example of some of the information that you can notify. Now, you don't have to notify everything. For example, if a role is granted or removed or something's checked in, you don't have to go into that much detail, but it is helpful to be able to be informed, especially when you have management who might not be part of that change management process, right? But you might want everybody else to be informed as to what's going on in the environment. This is especially helpful for when you have a delegated distributed delegation model. So you have a team that is managing GPOs for servers. You have a team that is managing GPOs for workstation, and then probably a third team that managing Intune profiles. So how does, if they're all doing their own things and they're all their own approvers as well, how does someone, for example, like a service owner for Active Directory or service owner for the infrastructure, become aware of the changes that are being going on? This is a great opportunity to do that. So that's at a very high level. I mean, if you know, if anybody's interested, yeah, we do have a YouTube channel that goes into in-depth. But just to show you an example, if you did wanted to check out a GPO and make a change, you know, you would check this out. You could select edit, you know, and we try to make the experience very familiar with with what, you know, folks are familiar with. So we have our own editor that that connects to the GPMC API, uses those same APIs so that the experience is the same. So I'm just going to delete this over here, and I'm going to go back, and now I'm going to check it in. You'll notice that you're prompted to enter a severity, a change record number, and then a comment, updated GPP mapping. Okay. Now this is going to go to the this is going to go to the approver. The approver is going to get that comment in an email. He's going to see the differences in the email, and then he can come here, approve it, or he can reject it. And now, if you have a separate deployer, they would then get a notification. He would come in here, hit deploy, either deploy immediately or schedule to deploy. This, you know, we have customers that say that this has saved them because they don't have to wait till midnight in order to hit, you know, deploy a change or to make a change. They can set it in the system and then would automatically do it for them. Once it's deployed, what happens is everybody in that approver, editor, and deployer role will get a notification saying that the deployment was successful. All right. Same process that we talked about, having conflicting processes or different processes. The same process is being able to link GPOs. So here I'm going to edit this this OU here. I'm going to pick a domain, pick a specific GPO that I want. Maybe this one here. I can add it, and it comes down here. And you know, the cool thing with this interface is that you can also just click and drag to change the link order. If you want to enforce a specific GPO, you can delete a GPO, disable a GPO, and so forth. Once you're done, you select OK, check in, approve, and deploy. And that process is the same when it comes to Intune profiles, right? Again, you would check it out, edit a setting, and then check it in and roll that out. So just at a quick high level of what Change Manager is, a brief introduction of what Change Manager does and how it can help you.
Yeah, it's amazing. And just for some additional context, Advanced Group Policy Management is end of life in April. The product that Danny just walked through is called Change Manager for Group Policy and Intune. And that is only one piece of what we do here at SDM. We have our migrator reporting, auditing, compliance. We have a laundry list of things to help you in your configuration management environment across Group Policy and Intune. I think that was an awesome demo, Danny. Thank you for taking the time to do that. Did we have any questions, David? I haven't been.
Yeah. And it's good because I think that the demo and some of the comments that came in, or some of the things you guys covered toward the end of the webinar, just lead in nicely with some of the questions we had, which had to go into, like, do you guys offer guidance on deployment of the application and guidance on how to use it? Do you guys offer any kind of services, like even for auditing people's current environments and how best to use your application?
That's an excellent question. The answer is yes. We're always here to lean in to help. We'd actually really like to help as people start to deploy POCs. We are. It's more than us helping, to be honest. We learn a lot from every customer interaction, so we are there for that. Um, we don't have a service that will do the auditing for you. That's on your side, but we're surely there to help you understand how to do it. From a documentation perspective, which we're constantly evolving and growing and as we learn, the products come with not only installation guidance and user guidance, sort of your administrative content, but we also have separate guidance if you're in an HA environment and you need to deploy a highly available environment as opposed to just the single instance. But yeah, Danny, I don't know if you have anything to add there. We're there for you.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, and as you mentioned, from a POC right to a production rollout, when you do purchase the product, there are hours allocated to be able to assist you with the install of the product. Not a problem.
Great, great. Okay, and you touched on that these sorts of group policy and Intune configuration, assistance, and locking down security was not just an issue for big companies, but for small companies. And so question came in like, how small is small where this would make sense?
Oh, that's a great question. Maybe there's 5 people. Everyone has their own computer. You don't have a domain. You don't have an enter account. You're just sort of working together ad hoc. You still honestly put yourself at risk from a business perspective, right? Hackers want to mess with small companies as well.
Absolutely.
But I do think
Absolutely.
there's a justification to say, gosh, if you have 20 GPOs, you need to manage change. Yeah, I might go.
I mean, if you've got a global admin, you probably need
Right.
something like this.
Right.
So another question came in is, do you guys ever see your solution or could your solution be used sort of by an MSP to deliver as sort of a multi-tenant kind of a service?
Yeah, we do have instances where folks are using Change Manager for multiple tenants. Change Manager supports any tenant that is trusted, so you can have multiple tenants within Change Manager. But if, for example, you are untrusted or air-gapped environments, we have situations where there are tenants where they're air-gapped environments. You could install a separate instance in that situation and then manage the GPOs that way. So you have the benefit of that change management in all different types of scenarios.
Great. 2 more quick questions, and we'll get to the giveaway. So this question is, how is your solution priced? Is it priced by the endpoint, the user, the node?
We didn't invite salespeople to this conversation. I'll let Danny take that.
Yeah, no, no problem. Yeah, I mean, it's different products are priced differently. So some of our products are priced by GPO, the GPO count, and other products, for example, Change Manager is priced based on active computers that were active in the last 60 days. Yeah.
Okay, great. Awesome. And so, last question, this came in quite a few times, is where AGPM may very well go away next week. Do you foresee that Intune would totally replace it?
Oh, it really interesting. First off, AGPM will go away on April 14th. I find it very hard to believe that Microsoft would change their mind at the last moment. They've been planning this for a long time. Intune does not replace AGPM in any way, shape, or form. But there is a feature that, and I think the Intune team did a really smart thing when the Stryker breach occurred. They immediately put up a banner in Intune to promote a relatively new bit of capability called multiple admin approval, which does create a bit of a workflow. It's hard to really talk about because it's not a competitive thing, right? It doesn't do full change management. It just adds this, someone does something and it goes into a list and someone has to proactively go into that list and take the next action. So I think Microsoft did a really good thing with this multiple admin approval. It is not change management. We don't want to kid ourselves. It is one piece of a very complicated calculus. So Intune doesn't replace it, but there are capabilities. And then another thing that is a truism at Microsoft, which you may or may not be aware of, most of the Microsoft 365 services, actually all, are built on the Microsoft Graph. And that graph is essentially an industry standard API that allows you to do things the way you want to. So to map the business model of yours, then you can build some automation and you can have an infrastructure as code framework or a DevOps model, and you can use the graph to execute these actions. And they've made it a bit simpler for IT pros because in parallel, they've built a bunch of PowerShell modules that do these graph things. So there are open APIs that organizations can try to do things. We've already done that, right? We've built these solutions. This is our expertise. So we don't think those home-baked solutions are concerning. They should be concerning to the IT organizations. Change management is very complex. Build your own and then reap the repercussions, right?
Yeah, don't roll your own. Don't roll your own. Go to the experts. Make sure that you modernize your configuration management. Make sure you check out SDM Software. And of course, without their generous support, we could not hold events like this. So Kevin and Danny, thank you very much. Thank you again to SDM Software. Thank you to our audience for being here again. We greatly appreciate your time and your attention. We hope today's event you found worthwhile. Let's put up the giveaway. Good luck with that, everyone. Thank you again.
Thank you, David. Thank you, everyone.
Of course.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great day ahead, everyone.